Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and today I'm joined by Trevor Fayle. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. How are you doing, Dave?
I'm doing great. It's great to have you on, and also to discover that we're like practically neighbors.
I
I think,
know, too funny, right? Small
yeah,
world.
like I can hit one of the goons' houses from my house with a rock. I think. Uh, so it's a small world, small world. If you'd be so kind to kind of introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Trevor William Fayle. I'm a big proponent and fan of tabletop role playing games and fantasy elements of all kinds. Truly. Um, Most recently, I am the DM for Critical Fail DM, our new sort of like just a group of people celebrating D&D and all forms of nerdiness. We have a podcast, the STRAHD Cast. We're on TikTok and YouTube and all over the place, spreading our Goonie nerdiness wherever we go.
Awesome. As always, folks, down in the description below, you can find the link tree to go follow Critical Foul across the interwebs. And also, we're wrapping up our Kickstarter today, so that's winding down, and the link is for that is in there as well. So, how did you guys get started? We were talking a little bit beforehand. It sounds like this is just the group that you play with.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. We originally just wanted to play Cursive STRAHD. I was just gathering together this group of friends to run them through Cursive STRAHD. We'd attempted to try it one time before, and that campaign kind of fell by the wayside. And so we just we decided to restart with a couple of extra friends. And Campbell, who plays Winnie in the STRAHD cast, decided to just for fun film some little pieces of our campaign and throw them up on TikTok. Just to see what would happen, just for fun. And the response we got to those TikTok videos was just way more than any of us expected or could have dreamed of. We had a little bit of a blow up after we did a series of videos on our D&D road trip to the beach in Rhode Island. And yeah, people, we just started collecting this really loyal fan base who were, and every TikTok video we put up, the comments were always the same, like, when are you guys going to stream on Twitch? When are you guys going to make a podcast? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? And so we sat down one day and decided, like, all right, well, we got to give the people what they want. So we started recording our episodes and released the STRAHD Cast, our podcast of our Curse of Strahd campaign, back in October. And we've recently, and since then, we've just sort of been expanding out into a bunch of different platforms. We're on YouTube now. We started streaming a Call of Cthulhu mini campaign on Twitch. And we're all really excited and loving the experience. And this is really only the beginning. We're really excited to see where this thing goes.
So, how far into the campaign were you before you decided to take it
Mhm.
public?
We had started playing in the summer, and we started recording in the fall. So we were a few months into it, and we'd had maybe, I don't know, anywhere from 6 to 10 sessions before we started. So what we did is we actually made a sort of session 0 episode of the podcast, which was sort of just like summing up the events that had happened that all took place before we started recording for the podcast. And we released that before the official launch of the podcast.
Nice. How long do you think it's going to go? Do you have like kind of a number of sessions in mind, or is it like as long as it takes?
Well, that really depends on the players,
Yeah.
how much time they want to spend killing vampires versus how much time they want to spend, playing cards at the tavern. But yeah, I can foresee another maybe. I can foresee another few months out of it for sure. Maybe 4 to 6 months before we wrap on the Stradcast.
Yeah, I think doing a weekly game, it took us almost a year to get through
Mm-hmm.
Curse of
Yeah.
Strahd.
Yep. That sounds about right. Yep.
We and that just kind of started like we were like we had all gotten together, kind of similar. We had all gotten together for someone's birthday, and
Uh-huh.
then like it was just before the pandemic hit. So it was like
Mm-hmm.
February 2020, And then everyone went in, then everything went into lockdown. We're like, we still want to hang out. How about we do a virtual thing Saturdays? And someone started running Wildermont, what is it? Frozen Sick from the Wildermont campaign setting. And then someone's like, I'd really like to be a player in Cursive STRAHD. So someone else like took over the reins and started running that. And now we're like have a Ravenloft campaign going where we're like cycling through DMs depending on which domain we end up in.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah.
I
love Cursive STRAHD. This will actually be the second time I've ever run it. The first time I ran it was during, right after the pandemic really kicked in. Some friends and I were like, let's not let this thing die. Let's keep working on this. So we continued to meet up. And yeah, that's actually with a group of friends who I DM for another podcast with outside of the Critical Fail DM, and that's Crit Out of Luck is the name of that group. If you're sensing a theme, it's definitely there. But yeah, and so the campaign we're doing for that podcast is actually a continuation. The same characters after Barovia is brought back into the world, rejoined the world around it, and all the insanity that entails. But yeah, I love Cursive STRAHD. This is the second time I've ever run it, and it's even better now the second time through. Because I learned the ropes, and I'm really taking things up to another level.
Where did Barovia get plunked down?
So I plunked it down into a homebrew world of mine. It's sort of this connecting passageway between two kingdoms that when it vanished, the two kingdoms were cut off from each other, isolated entirely, because Barovia was the only passageway through. So now that it's back, a lot of the campaign is like these two kingdoms being sort of reintroduced to each other. It's pretty fun.
Cool. It is kind of fun to see where you can take these pre-written campaigns and where they can go, from there. Oh, what level?
Well, that's, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what level did the campaign end at? What level was your players?
They ended at 10. That's, I think, about where STRAHD wants you to end. But now they are 15, which is the highest. It's the highest level I've ever played a campaign to. And it's a unique challenge as a DM,
I don't know, first or third level adventure.
Sure, right, yeah.
And I'm just like, I'll just like double or triple all the numbers or whatever.
Yeah, I'll make it work.
But like one of the players is like, I cast Wish to use teleport for us go from here to the to the top of the mountain where the lair of the creature was, and just like skipped everything.
Skip the entire adventure.
Which worked out good. It really condensed it down to one session.
Yeah. Well, that's the strength of 5e, right? Is like that kind of flexibility is something that you can't recreate in any other medium. Like that is what makes 5e and tabletop role-playing games in general so special. I love that kind of stuff.
So are you playing any non-public facing games now?
Yeah. I I have myself involved in maybe 5 or 6 campaigns at any given time. I have one that I'm playing with some friends from college who we've been playing together forever. I play with that same Crit Out of Luck crew I play with all the time. We're really good about rotating around who's DMing at any given time, which is a really nice thing to have, because I was becoming pretty accustomed to being in the forever DM until we started this sort of rotating schedule of DMing, which is really valuable, because it's nice to break away and be a player every once in a while too.
Yeah, I feel like the forever DM is the death of many a campaign, right? Like just because you lose interest or you just get burned out, and then like let's take a break, or you get another idea, right? And it's like, we'll do this for a little while, at least in our group anyway, and we'd never go back to those things we said we would go back to.
I know. Yeah, that's such is the fate of so many campaigns.
Yeah. So now what we generally do is we play Saturday nights, but they're like every Saturday is a different campaign with a different GM, and then we try to like set them up for a certain amount of sessions so that they end. We find that helpful too. So like me and Ted are the only ones that are willing to like just dedicate all of our Saturdays, and
Yeah.
finding other groups of adults. We've had to put together like 3 different groups in order to do that.
Yeah, it's tricky. The greatest challenge of Dungeons and Dragons is not slaying monsters. It's getting a getting a group of adults together consistently.
It is not easy. That is for
Uh-huh.
sure. Well, that's good that at least you have some games that they're not public
Mhm.
facing.
Yeah, that's a really nice touch point to have still to be able to go back to, because putting a game out there in front of an audience is incredible, and I'm really loving and enjoying every second of it. But it does change things a little bit. There's just another layer to be conscious of. That there are eyes on you, and you kind of have a responsibility to provide them with something that's worth the time and energy that they are giving to you as a group. So it's nice to be able to have some more relaxed games that I can just play in my own time. It's important, I think.
So there's a little angst in the chat because you're cheating on them,
Uh-oh.
according to
Oh no.
Daniel.
Oh, so there's the goons. That's one of the goons.
Yeah.
A favorite joke amongst the goons is that anytime I'm playing with this other crew, I'm playing with my other girlfriend. Is a favorite joke of ours.
Yeah.
But they know that I'm ride or die. Crit fail DM. I mean, it's my face on the tin, so I got to be there for it.
You got to be there for it. How did you get involved with the other podcast?
The crit out of luck, you mean? Yeah. That also it was the same thing. Just another a group of friends decided to just we were having a great time playing, and we decided to just put our stuff out there and see who takes interest in it.
Well, the Critical Fail group gets to benefit from the fact that you're already doing it somewhere else. So you got to make a bunch of mistakes on the first one, and they get the better version.
Well, learning a lot of lessons. Yeah. I mean, starting this little business together has been a really incredible adventure, and I'm so grateful to have the goons, who are all so multi-talented and smart, and we're all just really close friends, and we've there have been many times where we've run into things where we've had to like really figure stuff out, and we've made some mistakes, but we've learned from them, and I'm really proud of the work that this Critical Fail DM group has put into making this thing a success. I think we're uniquely suited just with our varied talents. Ned, as I mentioned, we were talking earlier, is not only is he great at playing the game, but he's a woodworker. And Kay, who is also running our Call of Cthulhu mini campaign, is they are a web developer. So websites and the SEO functions are a specialty of theirs. And Tyler, who plays Artemis in our podcast, is a brewer. So we always are well stocked with refreshments at all of our campaign sessions.
So
and Campbell,
your website will always run. You guys will always be inebriated, and you have a good place to sit.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And then Campbell, who really we owe this whole experience to, is the one who first started putting our stuff up on TikTok, and she just has a really vibrant and robust understanding of the rhythms of social media. We owe all of this to her, to be completely honest. So we all have our own unique individual skills that come together to make this thing the success it's been so far, and I think it has I think it really has legs, and I think it's got a lot of gas. So we're all interested to see where it goes.
So how many episodes are up? If people wanted to jump on, how many? How much catching up do they need to do?
So we are only 14 episodes in, and they're only about an hour and a half each. So you're not too far behind. And then, as I mentioned, there's the episode 0 to catch up on all the events that took place before we started to record. But it's a great place to jump in.
That's like not even 3 episodes of Critical Role.
Exactly. So come on over. It's a great place to jump in.
That's funny. What has been your favorite part about running that game?
This group of players, the goons are so wild. I think the thing that has made this so much fun, and it's the same thing that has sort of drawn our audience to us. It is it is just how excited everyone is to be there and excited at the things that happen. Like, in all of our TikTok videos, it's all of us, if it's a tense moment, all of us are standing up around the table and screaming and hollering and like running around. Like there's just such vibrancy and energy in the room when we play. And I think that's also what attracts our audience to us. Like every time something, even when it's just, if it's a side moment where I'm really only dealing with one character, or one or two characters are off on our own, everyone is still engaged and still excited. It's just the energy in the room is so wonderful when we play.
So I'm reading the comments. Can you tell me about goons and gaggle and where those terms came from and who they apply to?
Sure. Yeah, so we call ourselves the Goons. That name came about, just when we first started the campaign. We were just hanging out as friends. We just mess around and we're pretty silly and funny, and so we just like, we're a bunch of goons.
Yeah.
And so when things started taking off, we were really considering, okay, well, what are we going to call this thing? How are we going to market ourselves? And it just felt disingenuous to be anything other than what we are, which is a bunch of goons. And so the gaggle refers to our Discord community, which is so incredible. It's one of our Patreon rewards. Any tier gets you access to our private Discord server. And our Discord is full of some of the most genuinely warm, kind, and talented individuals that it has ever been my pleasure to meet, virtually or otherwise. The fan art that we receive from them, and someone knitted us a bunch of scarves. I wear my scarf every single day when I go out. And it's just such a warm, lovely community, which is really nice, because a lot of times in D&D, the D&D community is subject to not always the best behaved players, and so it's nice to have this Discord community, which is really a safe haven for people who have a deep love of the game, and respect the vulnerability that D&D is sort of asks for.
I feel like, so a lot of times, you hear about how bad like the comment section is on YouTube, but I feel like in the D&D space and the RPG space, it's a bit better than maybe some of the other spaces. I mean, you still have, you're going to get D-bags no matter where you go.
Always.
But, the community and the hobby has been, really good to us. And, we've always enjoyed connecting with folks. So for people that haven't checked out the podcast or watched you guys stream, do you guys do it in person? Do you do it, Hollywood Square style in the boxes? What do you guys do?
Yeah. So for the Twitch streams, which we're currently doing our Call of Cthulhu minis campaign now every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. That is hosted by Kay, our keeper of arcane lore. And that, it's the Hollywood Square boxes. So come check that out. And then for our podcast, the STRAHD CAST, every Sunday at noon Eastern time, we do a live premiere of our new podcast episodes. So so folks can come to our YouTube channel and check that out, and we hang out in the comments and have a great time listening to the episode as it premieres.
Cool. Where are you guys going after Curse of STRAHD?
That's a great question. And I don't think we've quite decided yet. Certainly the next thing I want to do with the Goons is a homebrewed campaign. Curse of STRAHD has been so much fun. And I'm so excited to explore a story and a world all my own with these crazy goons. And so I'm sort of in the beginning phases of piecing that together. So it'll be a homebrew of some kind, but whether it's continuing the story of these characters we're currently playing in Curse of STRAHD, or a new set of heroes, that I think only time can tell.
What do you prefer? Personally, prefer homebrew or pre-written?
I mean, it's funny because even if I do pre-written adventures, it ends up being pretty homebrewed anyway. Like my favorite thing about Curse of Strahd is that it leaves some things specifically vague. I think to encourage you to come up with your own answers to plot points. So I mean, I guess the answer is homebrew. I being imaginative and creative is one of my favorite things about D&D. So I love a homebrewed world, and I love putting homebrew elements into pre-written adventures.
For sure. Actually, one of the reasons why I don't actually run pre-written stuff because I feel like it's way more work than just making it up myself.
Fair enough.
Because like you said, it's like you're gonna run the pre-written thing, but then you're gonna want to put your own stuff in there and tailor it to players. So to me, that seems like a lot more work than just starting from scratch.
Sure, it's like it's easier to build a new house than renovate one.
So the next thing will be D&D though.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and we're all interested in branching out into other TTRPG games and formats. That's why we're doing the Call of Cthulhu. And I think sort of our Twitch is a great place to explore that kind of stuff. But I think in terms of the podcast, at least for the next one, we'll keep D&D. I'll never say never. Yeah. Who knows what the future holds, but yeah, after Curse of Strahd, I'd still love to keep it 5e. It's my bread and butter, and I just never get tired of it.
We generally, what we're doing now is we've like, in our home game anyway, we have like 2 D&D campaigns going on, and then one game that just not D&D. We did The Expanse, we did Monster of the Week. Now we just started Shadow of the Demon Lord. So it is it's good to take a break, and then we on the live channel, on this channel where we run our stream games, so far we've done Quest, we've done Cypher System, we're doing a second run at Cypher System but using their supers rules instead, as well as of course D&D as well. But it's just good to like mix it up and kind of get a palate cleanse from time to time.
Definitely, and there's so much stuff out there. I mean, D&D is obviously the most dominant, but yeah, there's a whole world of TTRPG content. When you start peeling back the layers, it just never seems to end.
Have you run other games, or have you just been kind of sticking with D&D?
I've dabbled in some other stuff. I've played Pathfinder before, but I largely find that to be a little too crunchy for my taste. Yeah. I'm much more sort of just interested in the narrative aspects of the game. I've done Dungeon World, which is still sort of a high fantasy setting, but just a little bit of a different rule set. That's all built around a system of 2d6s, which is really interesting. Call of Cthulhu I've done some Cyberpunk before, which is really, really fun, really interesting, but very, very complicated. Yeah. But the aesthetic is pretty untouchable. I love that a lot. So yeah, I mean, I've dabbled in a lot of other stuff.
It's so weird where like Cyberpunk, right? When I think about Cyberpunk, what it looked like when I was like in my teens or early 20s, and it's like now like trying to come up with a Cyberpunk system, like all that stuff that was Cyberpunk before, it was like kind of what we have now in the real world ish, right?
Yeah, right.
Like back then you would like literally be jacking something in to hack, where now it's like it would be wireless.
Yeah, just go over, just get into the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah, still no grappling hook arms, but that can't be far away.
No flying cars.
No.
The Jetsons lied to me.
Oh, how dare they?
Betrayed. Where do you lean when it comes to genres?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, traditional fantasy, I think has captured my imagination for my entire life, and it's hard to get away from that. Yeah. And so I think when it comes to exploring genres, for me, it's more about exploring kind of nuanced storytelling in a wider setting. Like one of the reasons I love Eberron so much is because that setting is so conducive to sort of like mystery stories and investigative, kind of stuff. And my personal favorite thing when I'm playing D&D, my favorite thing to do in D&D is to solve mysteries. I have a bunch, my favorite probably character that I've ever played is Sir Tegan Loxley. He is an elven blade singer, and he's sort of much in the sort of a Dresden Files sort of motif. He's sort of a magic detective.
Yeah.
So like mystery stories, stuff like that is oh boy, do I just love. But I'm open to explore anything, as long as there is a strong narrative and a good group of people to make friendships and bond with and explore things with. I'm pretty much on board. There's nothing that I won't try.
How do you feel about running mysteries? Because playing in them and running them are way different animals.
Sure.
Having come off,
Sure.
I think we did like 9 sessions of Monster of the Week. So it's like constantly coming up with, mysteries for them to solve and figure out.
It's challenging. It's really hard to put together because you almost have to kind of work backwards, right? Like you have to sort of start with your, who did it, and then kind of work backwards from there to lay out the plot or the breadcrumbs that your characters will follow. But actually something that I found running sort of mystery stories, and this is a tightrope to walk to be sure, but what I've found is that oftentimes players will come up with way better answers to mysteries than I could have in my prep phase. So sometimes if they come up with something really good, just on the fly, I'll say, oh, yep, it was the butler the whole time. You're absolutely right. You know what I mean?
I'm a big fan of, that style of GMing, and, some like I will create puzzles sometimes and not solve them, not come up with
right,
the
exactly.
answer, because they're probably going to come up with something better. Or I've definitely gone through that phase where, you feel like you're the DM and you have to have all the answers. So you pigeon your whole yourself into these answers. And when nobody comes up with them, like everybody's frustrated. So
yeah.
That's
been
the solution.
Definitely. I think putting faith in your players is a really strong DMing style.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And like the prep work on it, my favorite way to do prep work is less plotting out specific plot details or story beats or whatever else, and just putting more thought into having, a whole sense of your NPCs and how they think and feel and will interact with characters, and just sort of a general sense of the world so that you're prepared for what the players come up with, rather than having a series of things to just give to them. And it's a tightrope, you got to have a little bit of both, but it's the wise GM who really puts the faith in their players.
And also too, like you said, they'll come up with things you didn't think of. Like the Monster of the Week game was a modern day game. So like they came onto a scene where a couple of teens after a date got immolated on the porch. And they're like, is there a doorbell camera? And like my first instincts would be like, no, there's definitely not that. Then I'm like, sure, there was a doorbell camera. Let's see where this goes, and and then it challenges me as the GM to be like, okay, how can this still be a mystery, but we also get to use what their ideas, and not just say no to what they propose.
And then you get to just take credit for their great ideas, and you look like a genius anyway. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, for sure. So Brian wants to know, what house rules have you all come up with to benefit play while streaming? Curious how game mechanics can help or hinder a streamed game.
That's a great question. One of my favorite house rules that really enhances play for an audience has to do with death saving throws. So rules is written, when you hit 0 points, you go down, you're out of the fight, you're making death saves. What I like to do is just change that slightly so that still, when you're down, the only thing that you can do, is make death saving throws. But your character is still conscious. They can still observe things around them and speak to the other characters. And what that allows characters to do is really take advantage of that really heightened, dire predicament. And in fact, our most successful One of our most successful TikTok videos features that very mechanic. It was the first time that they met Strahd, right? And Kay, who plays Kaz, our barbarian, before the fight began, made some joke about how, before they even started the fight, they made a joke about dancing and how the fight was going to be kind of like a dance. And then at the end of the fight, Strahd, like ripped her sword out of her hand, shattered it across his knee, laid her out on the floor, and she was making death saves. But because she was still conscious and could talk, she reincorporated the dancing joke, which is Strahd, and the way that I like to play Strahd is like your classic sort of like Disney Renaissance campy villain, was so tickled by the joke that she made that he let her live. Do you know what I mean? And so, like, I just think allowing players to have command over those most tenuous and dire of circumstances, it makes players feel better because it's just more stuff that they can do, and B, is really, really amazing to watch as an audience, because it is such an inherently tense and heightened space to be.
One of the folks that I play with for death saves, they always DM or privately give what they roll to the GM, and they don't tell the rest of the table.
That's also great. Yeah.
So like, you don't know if they're about to die or not.
Yeah. Yeah. There are lots of ways that's great. I love that. Actually, I might start doing that. That's a really great way to heighten the tension even further. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I don't think we've actually implemented any, and not anything for the stream per se, other than some of our normal rules. If we're playing, like, I think we'll do things like allow someone to drink a potion, like as a bonus action. It's just like silly things like that. Like, we pretty much played the game mostly as is. Just like our pacing is way different than I think what Wizards intended, because like we'll do like one combat encounter a night maybe.
Yeah, that's generally how I favor playing as well. And I know, you're right in that I think a lot of it is structured and balanced around the idea that your players will be having multiple encounters a day.
Yeah.
And that's a holdover from earlier editions where that really was the focus. But I'm much the same way. I am really always more interested in sort of the narrative elements of play and combat emerging organically from the sort of choices that the players make. So yeah, I don't do a lot of random encounters or anything like that. And yeah, so yeah, you gotta sort of, I monkey with a lot of stats. I change around a lot of the stats behind the screen to keep things exciting and interesting, even if it is just one combat, making sure the combats that we do have are really exciting.
But yeah, I would say my favorite thing is to mash 2 to 3 monsters together.
Yeah, absolutely.
To kind of like make a new stat block. Although I'm admittedly super lazy about it, so I'll just have like 3 windows of D&D Beyond open. Be like, I'm using this part from this one and this part from that one.
Yeah, it's whatever works, really. Like, as long as everyone's having a good time, then you can't be criticized. You can't be critiqued as long as everyone's having fun. That's awesome.
What is the non D&D game you want to play in?
There's one. So there's a system called High Society. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's a Jane Austen role-playing game.
Oh, Good Society.
Oh, Good Society. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. Good Society. I'm a huge Jane Austen fan, actually. So I would love to play that. And that's something Kay is interested in that too. I think that's something that's in our future, either as a Twitch stream or what have you. But I'd be really excited to do that because I just love that time period, and I think there's a lot of great, mysteries and navigating sort of social cues and norms and scenarios, which is just stuff that is just some of my favorite stuff to do in role-playing games. So yeah, Good Society is something I'm really about.
I've had a few people on and we've talked about it, because at first, me knowing like nothing about Jane Austen and anything about them, like, what would you even do? Like, and then they got into explaining it. I'm like, we had done D&D in a castle, and like the way that kind of came about was the one sibling plays D&D and would do these like getaways, kind of like what you did, right? With their friends that just play D&D for the weekend. They're like, how cool would it be to do this in a castle? And their
Pretty
sister
cool.
was running Jane Austen events at like plantations and places where that would happen. So they had already experienced with doing these kind of events, and so they threw the D&D version of that together. So that was like an interesting conversation, because she's not a role player, and I was like, well, they do have a Jane Austen RPG
Yeah.
you could play,
Yeah.
because they have an RPG for everything.
Truly, they do. If there's something you're interested in, there's probably an RPG for it.
So do you incorporate any of those kinds of elements into your games?
How do you mean?
Like the Jane Austen kind of scenarios, those kind of intrigues and plots.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, social intrigue is one of my favorite things to incorporate into D&D. Like in the STRAHD cast, there's hints of sort of stuff like that with you've played before, between the Burgermaster and Valaki and Lady Wachter. There's like hints of some political intrigue and like some shuffling of power around in there. And so when I run it, I expand that out pretty massively and make it, almost a pretty full-blown quest all in its own, just solving that sort of political dispute. And in fact, we're playing again tomorrow with the Goons, and they've just taken some pretty big steps in that direction by pissing off the Burgermaster's right-hand man, Isaac Strasny. So the fallout of that is what we'll be exploring. Oh, tonight, actually. Tonight we're going to be doing that. So yeah, I mean, and then in my Crit Out of Luck campaign, my Homebrew campaign, The Last Song of Arcadia is, the main thrust of the first part of that campaign was there was a succession crisis in one of the kingdoms. There were a set of 3 twin siblings who all, were sort of vying for the throne, and they had to get to know all of them and sort of pick which one they wanted to be in control. So like court politics, intrigue, social stuff. Like I love that kind of stuff. It's very, very interesting to me, and I think it can be as exciting and interesting and rewarding and mechanically deep as combat in 5e. Just based off skill checks and what have you. So I'm a big proponent of that kind of stuff.
Do you use like any skill challenges in your games?
Yeah, I kind of do. I'll do a bunch of different stuff. I'm a big fan of something that I picked up from Dungeons and Daddies, another one of my most favorite 5e podcasts. I don't know if you've checked them out at all. But something the DM over there will do is you have to get like a certain number of successes over the course of a conversation. If you get a success, it sort of, if they're trying to convince a character or somebody, it'll push them towards, going your way. And if you get a failure, it pushes them in the other direction. And so like, like making a series of skill checks like that can be interesting. Sometimes I'll do, sort of aggregate skill checks, so everybody in the party has to pitch in some way, and they have to beat a cumulative DC of, 50 or 60 based on all their skill checks, stuff like that. So yeah, just sort of mixing up the way that those checks are incorporated rather than just being a singular straight roll to decide success or failure can make things deep and interesting, especially for classes that are geared towards social situations like that, like bards and rogues and those kind of classes that have that stuff built into their kits.
And also, like, if using that skill challenges, sometimes you can allow other players to use skills that might not necessarily usually be used. Exactly. If they can come up with like a creative way to introduce it into the scene.
100%. Rule of cool is the number one rule at my table. Like if you come up with something really brilliant, I'm not going to say no.
Yeah, it's kind of a port over from 4E. Which edition of D&D did you start with?
My first, actually, truth be told, I actually started with Pathfinder. And I started with Pathfinder, and then I didn't get into D&D. The first time I played D&D, first time I ever played D&D, I played 3.5, which is essentially just also Pathfinder. Yeah.
Some
But
might
then
say Pathfinder is just actually 3.5, but
well,
I digress.
that is correct. You're right, and you should say it. But yeah, so the first time I ever played D&D was 3.5. And then once I made the switch to 5e, I just never looked back. I know it's the most accessible D&D has ever been, and it sacrifices some depth for that accessibility. But then I think once you're with a group who knows what they're doing and is experienced with the game, there's a lot that you can do to deepen the 5e experience also,
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like the older I get, the less crunch I want, the less mechanics I want.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you. I think what makes D&D fun is the player experience at the table. And sometimes I feel like deep mechanics can almost act as a barrier to the cool stuff that they want to do if they have to do 5 different checks, to accomplish a task.
For sure. You should try Quest. There's literally no modifiers. You just roll a d20 for everything.
See what happens.
See what happens, yeah. Well, and also
but
it's also like another system that's not strictly pass or fail, where you can fail, you can succeed with some consequences, or you can have a success. And then also I think there's like a crit success as well. So I really have come to enjoy those kind of systems where you get to interpret. And they also tend to be rules light, but not always.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of, I think it's what is it, Shadowblade, or any of those systems where you kind of just like sort of build your character class as you go along. That stuff is really interesting to me as well. The idea that you can just kind of come up with your own mechanics is really fascinating to me, and really rewards what I think is the best kind of play, just being creative and thinking up solutions to problems.
Cooperatively coming up with stories at the table together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I feel like my philosophy in D&D is that the rules in D&D don't exist to tell you what you can do. They exist to facilitate what you want to do. So do you know what I mean? So anything that sort of accentuates that even more, I'm a big fan of.
I guess kind of like 5e is, it's written a lot like AD&D, where like third edition kind of like stepped in to add more nuance to the game and more choices. But I felt like by answering all those questions that they felt people had, you lost something, and I didn't really realize it until I started playing 5e. The fact that, and also like, when it's just way too much ammunition for the rules lawyer at your table, where they can point to like any given page in a book and be like, well, the rules actually say.
Yeah, and I don't know that, and there are some people who really, like, that's the draw of role-playing games, and all the power to you, however you get joy out of it. I'm not here to yuck anybody's yum, but for me, I think that kind of thing bogs down the experience. I would much rather just keep things fluid and moving and immersive. You know what I mean?
If the whole table's like that, it works fine.
Sure.
If not, and there's only like one player or two players that are like that, then it's like everyone else is like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. I'd never thought about it quite that way, but I think you're absolutely right. And then 4E was even more so. Like 4E they were basically just trying to make a video game tabletop. And we all know how that panned out.
They took a lot of the stuff from 4E and put it in 5E. They just like redressed it a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. 4E was like a very experimental time for us because we played it for a little while, but then like, because it was so different from what we were used to for D&D, it made it really easy for our group to start playing other systems instead. It's like, we're not, it doesn't really feel like we're playing D&D anymore. So, and I actually didn't mind it. There were things that I actually liked about that system. But also like there was a lot of sameness that I didn't really care for either.
Yeah, it was pretty. I could never quite get into it. It was just a little too gamey for me. But I love 5e. I'm a big champion for 5e. I think it's smart, and it's the most successful. its philosophy of accessibility, I think, has paid off huge for them in the long run. And, it's bigger than it ever has been.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
in part because of that accessibility.
the funny thing is, like 1E and 2E actually pretty much had less rules than any of the other versions of the game. It's just the rules they did have were just like needlessly complex.
Yeah, the wild. It was a weird start, wasn't it? Like elf and dwarf was a class. Like, it was a Wild West days for sure.
Yeah. So when you are a player, what kind of characters do you like to play?
Oh, great question. Yeah. My favorite class is wizard. Just because nobody can really compete with with the amount of things that a wizard can do. I like the stat of intelligence because I like investigating and I like figuring things out. And I love Bladesinger Wizard in particular is my far and away my favorite way to play the game, because I've always been a gish kind of guy. The mixing of the martial and the melee, like, ooh, it makes me so happy. Ooh, it makes me so happy. But I outside of that, I largely favor spellcasters in general, just because I like the amount of options that they have. I love cleric. I think cleric is low key the strongest class in 5e.
Yeah.
I love druid. I think in real life I'm probably a druid more than anything else.
Well,
yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, I homebrewed my own Circle of Steel druid, which is like an urban druid. I'll have to bust that out one day. But anyway,
I'm still waiting for an urban ranger.
Yeah, I can't believe I kind of can't believe we don't have that yet.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I've played all of it. Ironically, I think the only class that I really don't have any interest in playing at all is Bard, because that's just kind of what I do in my real life anyway. I'm an actor and an entertainer anyway in my real life. And so when I play a fantasy game, I want to branch out a little bit.
I want to do something different.
Yeah.
I need to set things on fire or stab them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my first 5e character was a fighter wizard dwarf.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, to me the appeal was being able to be a first level wizard and wield martial weapons and wear armor.
Yeah, feels good.
It definitely feels good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, feels real good.
And also action surging steel wind strike.
I mean, fighter is just a great dip for anybody, if you're talking about multi-classing, because action surge is so cool and it feels so good to basically take 2 turns.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one of the best feelings is rolling several crits on a steel wind strike. Is so much damage.
Oh, it feels really good.
And thematically, it just like looks cool, right? You just like teleporting all over the battlefield, whacking things.
Yep. Yeah, that's full anime, and I'm 100% in support. Yep.
So, what game do you think you would like to play or like to run for the Goons? That's not.
It's not D&D. Great question. Oh, actually, do you know what I really? Well, I mean. It still is, it's I'm really interested in trying out Humblewood for them, which is just sort of a skin for 5e. But playing as adorable woodland creatures, I can't, as chaotic as the Goons can be, just seeing them run around as like an owl and a deer and a raccoon, getting into all sort of hijinks, it really just tickles my little heart. I think it would be so fun. But I'm also really interested in trying. I'd really love to do a Vampire the Masquerade also. I think would be fun with them, because that's also, that has the sort of social aspects of good society in conjunction with also being a vampire, which is awesome. So that could be interesting to try too.
I feel like I've talked to a lot of people that are getting into playing that, streaming that. It seems to be on the rise.
It is, I think. Yeah, it's gaining some traction lately, for sure.
So, any thoughts or plans to do any live events in the future?
Other than streaming on Twitch, not in the immediate future. It's again, I'll never say never. I absolutely foresee it as something that we'll do. Uh, we just gotta gain a little. I think where we are right now in our process is gaining traction. Really just trying to get our name out there, which is why I so much appreciate you having me on today. And yeah, just continuing to grow and expand our brand, and it's the dream, of course, one day to do live events. I think get us in a room with our fans, even over our Discord, are so magnetic, and the energy is so exciting that if we ever got Goons and Gaggle together in one space, truly, I can only imagine the excitement of an event like that. So I mean, that's the
hijinks.
Yeah, the hijinks we would be up to. So yeah, nothing on the docket as of now, but I mean, we all got big dreams. We have unlocked big dreams for this project. So I mean, and never say never, and anything's possible.
Nice. So what would be like, what is the end goal? Because you guys are kind of still new and started doing this, but you're gaining traction pretty fast. Do you have like a goal that you're trying to achieve, or do you know where this thing's going?
Yeah. So right now, the macro plan is right now the big plan is, so we have this Patreon open to viewers, and everything we get on Patreon gets funneled back into the project for new equipment and just stuff to make the product better, to open it up to a wider audience. And then the big dream is one day, if we get really big, is to have a studio and full video productions of campaigns or whatever else, and to make like and then to just see how far it can go. We'll make a production company. Maybe we start using that our expertise and interest and talent and to make movies or whatever else. And I would love to. I have dreams of one day members of our gaggle who we love and hold so dearly and have already devoted a lot to us being our employees one day. To like give back a little in that way. We've got big dreams, and we're all just really excited to see how far we can take this thing.
Quick reminder, folks, down in the description, you can find links to find Trevor and the Goons across the interwebs. There's a link tree down there, as well as a link to our Kickstarter that is wrapping up today, so there's still time. There seems to be some interest in the chat that they will follow you to the ends of the earth.
Mwah!
or at least drive 11 hours is what I'm saying, for sure. So you had mentioned that you're actually in the entertainment business in your personal life. So is that something you are open to talking about?
Oh, sure, of course. Yeah. I'm a stage actor. My first passion in life was the theater. And I've been a professional actor since I graduated from school in 2013. The pandemic it was a huge upheaval for my life because, as it turns out, the theater sort of relies on large groups of people being in the same room together, in very close quarters. So theater really kind of shut down over the course of the pandemic. And, the first year of it was really rough for me. It completely threw my life into upheaval. But in a weird way, there is that silver lining. That's when I started getting heavier into D&D, and exploring these other creative outlets. D&D, I think, is great for actors because it works those muscles of thinking on your feet, and being present and connecting with the people around you. And it scratched a lot of those same itches for me. And, so now the dream is kind of if I can get to a point in my life where Critical Fail DM is my job, boy, I'd just be the happiest boy on planet Earth. And so, I think my theatrical career suited me well for this business and this way of life. And it is sort of my new primary way to express that creativity and that artistic integrity.
Some of the folks in the chat are ready to put their applications and resumes in.
Just you wait, Gaggle. We'll be getting to it real soon. Don't you worry.
There's also been a call for the Gaggle one shot.
Yeah, that's definitely something we got to get around to. We goons have talked about that a bunch of different times, and we want to get our ducks in the row and make sure that when that's something we want to tackle, we're really equipped to do it well. But yeah, that's definitely something we're into.
Do you find there are games starting up in the Discord?
Yeah, if you can believe it. I mean, yeah. One of my favorite things about the Discord is that we have this channel called Building Together. And yeah, people just meet up and build campaigns. It was when it first started happening, it was the wildest thing to me. I'm like it's just become such a wholesome and wonderful and loving and creative and ingenious community. That they can just hop on there without any input from any of us, any of the goons. They just go off on their own adventures, and I feel like a proud papa when they do it. You know what I mean? I just like it's the best.
Well, I suspected it was going on. I mean, if you gather gamers and enough gamers in one place, inevitably someone will want to game,
Yeah.
right? And then it'll
Absolutely,
happen.
absolutely, yeah.
That is the hardest thing about the hobby, right? Is finding other people to game with. But I think like when we started Nerdarchy, what we found was by doing Nerdarchy, we ended up in more places where there were more gamers.
Yeah,
So
100%.
like that, it like instantly defeated the past problem of ever having enough people to game with.
And that was one of my original goals in starting this project. Like one of the reasons I wanted to do this in the first place was to build a community and to build a place where like-minded people could find each other, and have a safe, fun, encouraging, welcoming space to explore this hobby. Because boy, I mean, when D&D works, there's just nothing else like it. I just think it's the greatest thing in the world. And if you find people who are as passionate and interested and excited about it as you are, there's just nothing else quite like it. So we just wanted to create that hub, create that space where that could be found.
Do you think you guys will ever create content for other people to use?
Absolutely. I mean, that's another big dream of mine. There are a bunch of people who, in our Discord who are homebrew creators, and actually, I'm going to feature some of their content in our Curse of Strahd campaign whenever the players come across it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to write my own adventures one day, and make these stories that other people could use and find joy in and change and make their own. Like, I think that sort of like cross-pollination is so good and healthy for our community. So I mean, absolutely, that's something that I want to do one day.
For sure. And like it's a lot easier to be a third-party publisher nowadays than it's ever been. Like back in third edition, they started with OGL and tons of companies sprang up. But there wasn't a Kickstarter back then, and like figuring out how you're going to publish and
Right.
get the word out, the internet wasn't as prevalent back then as it is now. So now like we're kind of living in like the heyday.
Yeah, it's true. It's the easiest it's ever been to get into the hobby.
Yeah, either from the professional level of trying to publish stuff, or just finding games and like-minded people that talk about gaming with, or get on lines on games online. I mean, at this point, I've been in games where like no one was even in the same country.
I know.
So
Yeah,
it's just crazy.
It's more popular than it's ever been. I mean, the meek have inherited. We have won the culture war. Like, it is cool to be a nerd nowadays, and I love it.
So, do you have any final thoughts before we head on out?
Well, I want to thank you, Dave, for having me on. I was so excited when we reached out to you and you actually responded. When I was first getting into D&D, I watched a ton of your guys, you and Ted, just talking about classes and lore and all that kind of stuff. And you were a great resource for me when I first started getting into the hobby. So it's really cool to be able to talk to you. And thanks, Gaggle, all of you out there in Gaggle who showed up for the interview today. Thank you for your support. We love you. And yeah, I mean, if this is your first time out there in internet land hearing about the Critical Fail DM and the Goons, please, I encourage you to check us out. Like the link trees down below. You can check us out on all our platforms. We're a really fun, welcoming crew, and we would love to have you along on the adventure.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. And as always, folks, links are down in the description. We've got the Kickstarter wrapping up, link to that as well. And until next time, stay nerdy.